Hey guys, so in today's video I decided to do something different and do a versus video between the two most famous dragons in Soulsborne, Midir versus Bayle. I'm going to give you my personal opinion on which of these two bosses have a better build-up to the fight, visual spectacle, soundtrack, boss visual design, difficulty, arena, the fight itself, and to finish all off, of course, I will give you my final thoughts. Hope you guys enjoy watching, and of course tell me in the comments whether you agree or disagree with my takes on these two awesome bosses. When it comes to the build-up to the fight, I think there are two important things to analyze: the NPCs involved in the fight and the actual run all the way to the boss. In Bayle quest, you will find Egon on the floor screaming in pain, and it will take you 5 seconds to get invested in this guy due to his awesome voice and lines. In fact, many of the things he says have kind of became iconic at this point, like "Curse you Bayle" or "With a hail of harpoons," and you can also summon Egon to fight alongside you against Bayle, which just makes all the thing more epic. On the other side we have Shira, which I honestly had to Google her because I simply could not remember her at all. And it's not surprising since you talk to her behind the door, and unless you go into a specific place in Gale's arena, you might even never get to see her. This one is a no-brainer point for Bayle. As for the run to the boss, in Bayle case we have some very annoying dragon fights along the way, especially Sandsax, which might be my most hated dragon boss fight in all of Souls. But on the positive side we have quite the visual spectacle with lightnings galore and the corpses of dead dragons. As for Midir, we meet him for the first time at this bridge, and even though there isn't much interaction with him at this point, it is quite awesome to see him for the first time as he flies and burns the bridge. A few minutes later we meet him again at another bridge, and this time is for an actual fight, and a cool one in my opinion. And if you want to actually fight him later, you have to beat him. And of course, I also have to mention the really epic entrance to the boss fight. So between the two runs, I think Midir is slightly better, so it gets the point, making the build-up for the fight a draw. As for visual spectacle, these two dragons excel in this department. Midir has lots of cool fire attacks in first phase, and also a very cool laser attack. The transition to second phase is pretty intimidating and brings some new cool looking moves like this one, and the ultimate laser attack, making this fight a feast to the eyes. Bayle, however, is in another league entirely, because most of his attacks are joined with either massive AoEs or gigantic explosions. Besides that, he has one of the coolest looking boss transitions ever, and this attack right here is one of the coolest looking things ever in any Souls game. Even though Midir is a stunning looking boss fight, Bayle 100% gets the win here. Time to talk about the soundtrack, and of course this is where things get subjective, because it all becomes down to personal musical preferences. Bayle's song is very cool and it melds well with what is happening on the screen. However, the soundtrack on its own is just something I never listen. On the other hand, Midir's soundtrack is my personal favorite in the entire Dark Souls trilogy and in my top 10 soundtracks in any video game ever. Soundtrack is a no-brainer for me. Midir gets the point here. Now it's time to analyze the visual design of the two dragons. As for Midir, he is one badass cool looking dragon that looks extremely menacing and pretty gigantic in size. I have no access to the boss models, but Midir feels like a much bigger dragon than Bayle, therefore more intimidating. There is only one thing I'm not the biggest fan on Midir, and that is his color choice. But Midir 100% looks like a dragon. Bayle, however, seems like a fat chicken. I'm sorry to all the Bayle visual design lovers, but him being so injured makes him look kinda silly in my eyes. There are some cool details like Placido Sac's head still being attached to his body, and things get better in second phase when he gets his wings. But there is no way I'm picking Bayle over Midir in this department. This is a very easy point for Midir. Talking about the difficulty in these two fights is without a doubt the hardest topic here. In one hand you have Midir, which was seen by many as the hardest boss in Souls history before Elden Ring came out, And on the other hand, you have Bayle, which I have seen many people consider the second hardest boss in the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. Now, I personally don't agree with any of these statements. They are hard, yes, but not crazy hard. And I have spent pretty much the same amount of time on these two bosses, which was around 2 hours to finally beat them for the first time. The reason why I find this topic so hard is because in future runs you realize that you can deal with most of Midir attacks just by rolling back, while Bayle will always have the problem of being in a game like Elden Ring, where if you have a good build, you can melt his health in less than a minute. Therefore, the only way I can see myself prevent another tie is to think of challenge runs, and as someone who has beaten Midir fists only easily, I have to give the point here to Bayle, which has much more dangerous attacks to deal with. The arena is the thing I'm going to spend less time talking about because they are both circular arenas with nothing on the floor to get in the way of the fight, which is always a big plus for me. So it all comes down to visual preference, and I give a slight edge to Bayle here, so another point for Bayle. And now it's time to talk about what I believe to be the most important subject here, which is how it feels fighting these two bosses. How well it flows, is there any problems with the hitboxes, is there any jank, and when it comes to Midir, and I think fighting him feels almost flawless. In fact, the only thing that bothers me in Midir fight is that sometimes the lock-on goes a bit crazy. As for the fact that yes, most of his attacks can simply be dodged back, there are still many other attacks that you have to dodge in different ways or even run in a certain direction. There are no bad hitboxes, just a beautiful fight in every way possible, where almost every perfect dodge is rewarded by Midir lowering his head for you to get that deserved punish. Another thing I like to mention is when you're close to the end, the game rewards you with one of the coolest staggers in all of Souls to finish the fight. Bayle, however, has a few problems. While in Midir fight is pretty easy to punish him after each attack, hitting the head on Bayle sometimes feels like a challenge. But that is nothing compared to the two biggest problems I have with this fight, which are the fire breath attack that will simply hit you in the most ridiculous ways ever, and the fact that many times this boss seems to be lost and starts attacking places where your character is nowhere around, being the start of second phase a big example of this, where I can ignore him entirely and just finish the fight. So the final point of this match goes to Midir. It's time for my final thoughts, and even though this ends in a draw, to me the two most important things in a fight are the fight itself and the soundtrack, and Midir got both points in that department, making my pick for the best dragon fight in all of Souls go to Midir. Hope you enjoyed watching, and again tell me what is your personal opinion on these two bosses, and as always I see you guys on the next video. Stay well, bye bye.